like to introduce Bob Madison, who had a lifelong fascination with trains. You don't think I can speak loudly enough? Okay. And then I'll let him introduce himself for the rest of the program.
Thank you, and thanks for coming out tonight. This is a nice sized group. I'm going to speak for a short while, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and then we're actually going to finish this railroad up here. We'll put it on the floor and do a little drilling and some driving of screws, and you're going to actually see one of these things come to life. Most of us, I think, have experienced the Lionel train in the attic or the Lionel train in the basement that hasn't been run for 50 years. And of course, Christmas, even Christmas in July, is the time when we want to get those trains out and refresh those memories. I'm going to be working off of a script tonight, not so that I can read it, but because I have very specific information that I want to cover. So I hope you'll excuse me if I keep nodding over and looking at the paper. If you already have a train set, the thing to do now, not waiting till Christmas, but get it out now, make sure that it works, make sure that it runs. If there are some problems with it, if it's a Lionel set or an American Flyer set, almost always parts are available or somebody's available to help you fix it. Here in Westerly, the nearest large concern that is a Lionel repair station is the Apponaug Color Shop in Warwick. They're very friendly. So you can get things repaired there. If you don't have a train, obviously, then Apponaug is a good place to look around to see what you might want to get when Christmas time does come around. If you don't have a train at all and you think you might need to get one, and I hope you will after you see this program, you can get individual pieces. If you have to replace more than an engine and a transformer or something from your old set, you might want to start with a whole new set anyway. But if you have a Lionel set and you can get it running, you're probably going to be okay. If you already have that train, you check to see how it will run. You set up your track. Most track comes in a circle or an oval. And before we begin to build a table for that track, you just measure the size of your track and add a couple of inches in each direction and see how far we can go. I'm of a minority school when it comes to toy trains and model railroading. I concentrate on small layouts, whether I'm doing a scale layout in HO or a toy train set with Lionel components. I tend to think that smaller is better. So as you pull out those components, think about where that's going to go under your tree. Think about what size layout you're going to build. For instance, I consider that a medium-sized layout. Most people consider that very small. That's much smaller than a 4x8 sheet, and you can actually pick it up and carry it. This one's only 42 inches square, but it will hold a loop of track. For such a small layout as this, I use 1/2 inch project grade plywood for the top, 1x3 pine for the sides. Some people like to use drywall screws to put everything together. I actually glue the pieces and hold them in place with 4-penny finish nails. I like that. Sometimes even good quality plywood comes bowed, so you may actually have to clamp pieces together while you put those nails in. Once the nails are in, that will hold the pieces together until it is dry, until the glue dries. This is 3/4 inch screen molding, and it makes the difference between something that belongs in your basement and something that belongs under your Christmas tree. It really makes it look like furniture. I have the plywood cut in the store. I have never yet experienced a piece that's cut equally on the opposite sides, as you would think it would be with parallel. So when you do measure these pieces to cut your length of your frame pieces, be sure to do the sides individually. And then do the molding one piece at a time and actually measure it individually for each side so that it comes out relatively close when you're finished. If it doesn't come out perfect, that's okay. That's what plastic wood is for. You just put some plastic wood in there and sand it up, and it will get rid of most irregularities. On this particular layout, I have one brace underneath, I think, that goes across the middle. You don't need really a whole lot of braces for one of these tables. They are surprisingly strong, especially when they're glued. So the yellow glue is what gives the whole work here. It's It's real strength. You can paint the top white to represent snow. I wanted kind of a rusty leaf color when I made that layout, and so I went with some barn red paint. It goes nicely with the Gaspé painting behind it. Of course, since I had some over, I painted this too. Most of the time, we have, I think, 3 train tables at home in Lowell where we teach in Arkansas, and all of those have left the sides unfinished. They're stored in the garage, they get bumped, scratched, dirty, and it's just much easier to clean the basic wood. If you have a secure place and nice wood, you could actually varnish the thing and it would look very much like a piece of furniture then. That would be very nice. The final trim here is held on by number 18 brads. The regular 4-penny finish nails are a little big for that. As they go through the hardwood, they'll get pulled to one side or the other, and then they'll show up as they miss the plywood on the inside. So we just use the brads. That works pretty well. Lionel trains are very heavy. This is a very small engine. You can feel how heavy that is. See, so that's a die-cast toy. So those trains are so heavy that as they run around on the track will start to creep. And as the track creeps, of course, sooner or later you're going to reach the edge of your table. So most people either nail the track down or screw it down. I screw it down with 3/4 inch number 4 screws, flathead screws. The track that I use is designed for that. Most people think that train set track looks better with ballast. Ballast are those stones that hold the ties and the rails in place. And as you can see, this particular brand has it molded in. I built a layout a few layouts ago, the first version of that Northern Forest layout over there, which had just the track and the ties, and then all of these were individual stones that I poured on and shaped and sprayed with water and then dripped with white glue, and it was, it looked great, but it was not as easy to put together as this. So I would highly recommend a brand of track that comes with the ballast molded in. Transformers come with train sets. They last forever. The Lionel transformer that you were talking about with the 2 big handles and so forth back from the 50s, people still use those because they're great, and no reason not to. But all train sets today come with a transformer. Very recently they've started to come out with some radio controlled trains. Lionel has. I haven't investigated in that, but I'm leery of it from previous experience. I think you want a transformer where your wires go to the track. Just stick with that, and you'll be happy with it for a Christmas layout anyway. The layouts that I build are just loops, ovals, circles, sometimes an oval within an oval on a big 4x6 sheet of plywood. Switches are tremendously expensive compared to everything else that you get pleasure out of with a toy train. And unless you're really into operating, dropping off cars and so forth, they're not worth the extra money. And a Christmas train, you usually just want to see it go round and round anyway. So no switches. I don't do any switches. And I wouldn't recommend that you do it unless you really are going to go in for a huge model railroad somewhere. Small railroad looks good with a single bridge. Lionel and Marx both made these back in the 50s. How old are you? When were you born? See, so this is much older than you are, and I mean much older than you are. But they're still around on eBay. I mean, we even have them for sale here at the Babcock-Smith house, and this is just some old clunky bridge, but they look really nice. There's something about our brains. We like to see a train partially hidden. And the most effective way to partially hide it is to have it go through a bridge. When you're watching that train over there, you're waiting for it to come out from behind the trees. You're peering through the trees to see it. And that's, I think what's happening is some other part of our brain is actually kicking in when we're trying to discover and resolve what is behind something else that we're seeing. And that's why bridges, I think, are so fascinating. Tunnels have sort of the same effect, except that people who run trains a lot have found that tunnels actually create anxiety because you hear your train running and you don't know where it is. All right, where's my train? Is it going to come out? Is it going to not come out? Lionel also made, which is probably better for our small tables, this is a girder bridge. This is also 50 years old. As you can see, it looks pretty beat up, but once you put it on your train set, it's great. I don't have a piece of straight track to show you. This was designed for the old-fashioned Lionel track that didn't have the ballast molded in. So on those, you just have to take it and run it on a piece of sandpaper on both sides for about 5 minutes, and then that will slip right in perfectly. But one of those bridges works really well. Two doesn't. For some reason, diminishing returns kicks in really fast on a toy train. And so you can put a bridge on and it looks really nice, but you put another one on and it doesn't look that much nicer. So save that space. You don't have a lot of space. A bridge has got to go on a straight section, so you're going to have a layout about that size. You still don't have a lot of space. So we've got to make room for all these other things too before we do that. If you have a bridge, you're going to want water. Don't cut a hole in your train table. Just get one of these plastic mirrors and glue it next to your bridge. Or just paint it on. If you're good with painting, you can use acrylics, and you can paint anything you want. Roads, you can paint, you could do this in ground cover. You can start with a brown base and paint a little green. You might start with a brown, for Rhode Island winters, you might start with a brown base and have a little grass and maybe a little bit of snow at Christmas time if you're really lucky. Just paint it on with white paint and that would look really nice. Okay, if you got your old train, got a table, set it up, start running, and you're all set. You can move on to the decoration stage. But what if you don't? What if you don't have a train? You say, okay, I'm going to go out and buy a train. Stop right now. Because Lionel makes more stuff than the United States has hidden away in that warehouse where they put the Ark from Raiders of the Lost Ark. There really is too much Lionel stuff. So you can start with just a train set or something like that and say, okay, now I got to get going. I got to do this and get the first one that comes along. But you're going to want eventually something else. So a better way to do it is just to close your eyes. Everybody close your eyes right now. Now imagine what your toy train layout should look like. Does it have a diesel or a steam engine? Does it have passenger cars? Or does it have boxcars? Does it have trees mostly, or does it have buildings mostly? And you think about that for a while, and you can open your eyes now, and you don't have to share with me what you've concluded, but you'll have a picture of what you think your train layout should look like. And provided that it's not bigger than this room, you can probably do it. If it's a small train size, you know what you really want. Write that stuff down. Make a list. And think about it. Then you're not going to end up what most of us do when we start this, and that's just buying too much stuff, and then how do you get rid of it unless you donate it to the Babcock-Smith house? How do you get rid of that stuff afterwards? So, but just think about that, think what you want. Now you're ready to go to a hobby store, or to be much more efficient about it, to start browsing eBay. Are all of you familiar with eBay? Do you use eBay? They have whole sections of Lionel trains, and you just search for something like Lionel Christmas or Lionel Holiday, and you will find all of this stuff popping up. In particular, you're going to want to think about an engine. If you're old-fashioned and you want a freight train, you're going to think about a caboose. Of course, they don't use cabooses on real railroads anymore. If you want passenger cars, then you want to think, do we want some modern-looking passenger cars? Do we want some really old-fashioned ones, or do we want something in the middle? If you want just passenger cars and a steam engine, the best buy is to buy a Polar Express set. If you've read the Polar Express and you know how wonderfully successful they were in adapting that into the movie, and Lionel was equally successful in adapting that as a train set. So you can get your steam locomotive and there's 3 passenger cars, and the back one has a little platform where Billy's out there singing his song, and it's quite wonderful. And if you buy it as a set, you get your track, your transformer, engine, and cars, and it comes to your door, and you don't have to go looking for it. About $250. Now that's for a brand new unopened set. Everybody knows on eBay you can do much better if you get used stuff. If you buy an engine that's 25 or 30 years old, you can get one for $25 or $30. a Lionel engine and it'll be okay. Might not look as great as some other engines, but those are all personal things too. If you don't have a favorite engine, you just know you want a steam engine, just get something that's fairly inexpensive and it'll work great for you. On the layout that Karen asked me to build for our grandson, it's a 4x6 layout, which is a little bit bigger than that one. It has 2 ovals. The outside oval, we had to add about 32 inches of straight track, but we only added 2 more passenger cars, 26 inches worth. And that looks about right on the outer oval. I used to be an HO scale modeler, so the inside oval, which really should have only 3 cars, we have about 20. So of course we did get too much stuff, but it was a lot of fun, and we still get it out and use it. One of the joys for me is not sticking with a particular train set, but mixing and matching. So the trains that you see here are mixed and matched. The one back there is a fairly expensive engine. It's still what we call 027 or traditional Lionel, which means it's a little bit smaller than a scale-sized engine. But that one has a sound system in it, and you heard it. But that raises the price. As you also found out, we don't have it running now. Because if you have a sound system, you can't leave the train running because you can't watch TV or have a conversation or think or whatever. So, and all of these trains, almost all of these trains have a whistle that's operated by the transformer anyway. You don't need to have a sound system. Other engines that I like, I think the most beautiful engine that Lionel ever made was this one. It's called the Kinlet Hall. And this is the type of engine that was used in the Harry Potter movies. And you can buy a Lionel version that's painted like the Hogwarts Express engine. This happens to be a model of the real engine. This is a scale model, but it's built to 143, which that's a little bit bigger than what American models are. If we used an actual O scale model, it would be 1/4 inch to the foot, or 148. And that actually gives you a pretty big engine, but most Lionel stuff that I have isn't scale. It's undersized, and that's better for these small layouts. But this is the most beautiful engine that they ever built, and it comes in this version, the Kinlet Hall version. It comes in the Harry Potter version. And, good news for us, it comes in a red Santa Flyer version and a green Santa Flyer version. And you'll see these on eBay. You'll see them around, and sooner or later you'll get a pretty good price on one if that's the engine that you want. But you'll also see, as in the handout, many other engines and many other cars that are available. These just happen to be some of my favorites. These are not my photographs. These are photographs I pulled off eBay. But we have all of this stuff at home in some different color or not. For instance, there's an 060 tank engine in there. Thomas is a tank engine, but this isn't Thomas. But this is a tank engine, and this particular one I've lettered for Opie Granite because that's our family granite company. But you can get this in Christmas colors as well. You can get that in red and green. And saw one today. In a few minutes, I will talk about some individual prices, because you got to keep an eye on that, or this gets out of hand very quickly. I love the Nutcracker coach. There's actually a reindeer car that goes along with that. I think those things are very Christmassy, and that's what we use on our Christmas layout at home. But when I did do my Northern Forest layout, I just wanted a layout which had trees. All trees, nothing else. I wanted to see if I could build a Lionel layout that was just pure mood, that made you feel like Christmas or at least winter. So I chose all northern railroads, because that's where the Christmas trees are. And I chose railroads that had heralds on them. Those are the little pictures on the side. All of them I wanted to have heralds of either animals or trees. That was pretty good too. Still ended up with too many cars, so I had to cut down on the ones that I had. And so what's left over there are 2 Canadian national cars and a Maine Central car, and they all have little trees or leaves on them, and that's kind of fun. and they're against a setting of an assortment of trees that we see there. Another way to cut down on the number of cars that you're tempted to buy are just to buy cars that were manufactured for Christmas in the year that you were born. So we have one for our grandchild. If Karen's really good this year, she may get one for our second grandchild who was born last November. That car is out and now available. So that's easy Christmas shopping. We have a milk chocolate train, a hot chocolate train. As you know, in the film Polar Express, a lot was made out of hot chocolate. And so we have a whole train. It's got a Hershey's chocolate tank car and 2 Central Vermont milk cars. And we can put that on the layout if we want to. And those are, I mean, they're not directly Christmas items, but once you get out of the high-priced engine stuff, you can pick up box cars like that, for about $10 a piece on eBay. So that's a pretty good deal. Sometimes you'll pay more for the shipping than you will for the actual box car. But that's a nice way to look at assembling your own very personal train. You have a picture of the same caboose that we use for our Christmas train. If I'm just doing something more sedate, I use one of the thousands, possibly millions of SP or Southern Pacific type cabooses that Lionel built throughout the post-war period from 1945 to 1969. The one on the end of that train is about 50 years old. So that's, and they tend not to wear out. They tend to last forever. I mentioned that all of these makers, Lionel and other makers, sell both O-scale models and O-gauge toy trains. If it says O-gauge, it's probably a little bit smaller and a little bit ruggeder. If it says O-scale, it may not even run on Lionel track, and it probably won't run on track with as tight a radius as these table layouts. Say that 3 times fast. As these table layouts have anyway. So you want to stick with traditional Lionel, O27, O-gauge. These are all signals that we're working with slightly smaller pieces. On the other hand, those are scale engines, 143, a scale engine, 148. The refrigerator car, the second car on that train, the rusty colored one, that's a scale-sized car. In real life, refrigerator cars were a little bit smaller than boxcar. That doesn't look too bad there. So we keep it. Everything I've mentioned here and everything that you've seen, as you can see, it seems to fit together pretty well. Works okay. The motion and the sound of that train going around and around is kind of hypnotizing, but that's only half the fun of a Christmas layout, because the second half is the buildings and the village that you can bring to life with it. And there are many different ways to do that. Karen and I both grew up, maybe Ellen remembers these too, with cardboard Christmas villages, where you got these things, they were flat, and you had to fold them and put them together, and there were maybe half a dozen in a set. I loved those things. They don't last very well, but they're perfectly satisfactory. If you can find those, that's great. The next step up is cookie jars. This is the most common set. CIB. I don't remember what kind of cookies came in them, but you see these in thrift stores all over the place. And we have a price on these of $2 each. You might find one for 50 cents, you might find one for $5. It just depends. But those are perfectly satisfactory to put on your Christmas layout. They look really nice. Of course, all of this stuff is profoundly influenced by Charles Dickens and A Christmas Carol. Everybody wants his Christmas layout to look kind of British. And you'll see that with some of these other village materials that you do too. For our Christmas layout in Arkansas, I used almost entirely Department 56 buildings, and they were all buildings that were made of brick, because we did want to get that Dickens look. And in fact, one of the buildings is Gad's Hill. It's Dickens's house. So Department 56 is sort of at the top end of these porcelain buildings. Porcelain buildings are fragile. You can't just bang them on the floor and so forth. But if you take care of them, they're okay. They're much more likely to get broken in the off season, which is why you should save your boxes and the foam that they come in. Buildings usually are very cheap in thrift stores, and you don't have to pay the shipping that you would pay if you bought them on eBay. So buildings are a good idea to keep your eye open. We have particularly good luck with the Goodwill store in Groton for some reason. I think it's because the Navy people get all these Christmas things and then they gotta move out. So you can't take it on a submarine with you, and the wife won't take it in the back of her car when she has to move all by herself because her husband's at sea. So anyway, all of these buildings show up at the Goodwill store, and there's a fairly constant supply. Some thrift stores save everything until November, and then they put it out with their Christmas sales, so you can swoop down. With the buildings, like the train cars, write a list. What kind of buildings do you want? Do you want something that looks like a twin home from the city? Brick, stucco, classical columns? Or do you want something that looks like a boat shed? Over there, there happens to be a Department 56 boat shed made out of wood. Looks like something you'd see on the coast of Maine, and that's where they got the idea from. Department 56 has several whole series of Christmas villages. Probably the next nicest ones are the Lomax ones, and most of the ones that you see here are Lomax. Someone has donated a collection to the Babcock-Smith house for their Christmas sale. So those are very nice too, but you find odds and ends from any of these companies, and they look pretty nice. At about $3 or $4 a piece for the least expensive ones, and $10 or $15 for Lomax ones. If you make a mistake, it doesn't really matter. You can pass it on or whatever. Or you don't have to put it on your train. You can put it on your mantle. We have a set of these that we just put on the mantle. We don't put them on a train set because we like the Christmas village. But that helps a lot. Other brands, Lomax makes the Dickens Vale. Well makes Heartland Valley Village. EPI makes Colonial America Collection. There's Mercury's, St. Nicholas Square, some really nice ones. Holiday Time Village Collectibles. Virtually every department store chain imports a line of buildings branded to itself. I don't know which stores go with which, but so around October and November, these things will start appearing at retail in the stores. But of course, after Christmas and throughout the year, they'll appear in the thrift shops, and that's where you really want to pick up your buildings. I try not to buy a chipped or cracked porcelain building because they're very difficult to repair in a way that actually looks good. But sometimes the building is for sale for $3 or $4, and it has the cord with it, the light cord. And sometimes that's cheaper than just going down to your local drugstore and actually buying a brand new cord for the lighted building. But you can pick up the cords pretty easily. They mix and match well with the different brands of buildings. Lighted buildings aren't usually built to scale. They're built with these Lionel trains in mind, but they all end up tending to be about the same size. If you buy the Department 56 Kensington Palace, which is where all the Queen's relatives live, it's not going to be as big as that palace usually was. It's about this size, and that's a huge building for a toy train. But they're still scaled to look about right with these trains, but usually reduced. There are other series of buildings, of course, that are only half this size. And they're made, if you're an apartment dweller or whatever, and you don't have a lot of space, then that's the kind of thing you would use on your mantle. They're harder to see, harder to see. The figures that these companies make are all bigger than scale, so that eyes of any age can see the detail. This is a woman with a lantern looking out, and they're very nice. These happen to be cast rosin figures, and whether they're rosin or porcelain, they tend to be brittle. Here's something that's counterintuitive, though. The porcelain ones don't have much extruded detail, and so there's not much to get broken off. With these little guys, they put on all kinds of fingers and antlers and everything else, and they can get broken very easily. So be sure that they get stored in cotton very carefully during the year when you don't have them out. Trees. This is surprising when I started this project. I knew that trees for model railroads were expensive, but they're ridiculously expensive. These are just bottle brush trees, you know, but as soon as they label like toy train or model railroad on it, then they charge twice as much for the tree. The way to get trees, once again, is to inhabit the thrift shops or Walmart in the weeks right after Christmas when all the extra trees go on sale. On a larger version of that Northern Forest layout, we had 3 dozen Department 56 trees that I bought on sale from a Christmas store. I could not possibly have afforded to buy those trees at retail. And then we went to the smaller version and eliminated that bridge and the siding. We still had room for a whole bunch more of trees that we just picked up at Walmart, those nice frosted trees with the hint of snow on them. One of the keys to your forests, if you want to make something look tidy like a garden, use the same trees throughout. If you want to hint that this is more of a wild forest, just mix the different brands of your trees up the way that is, and you'll get a little more sense of depth, and people will spend time looking at your trees. Of course, you want them to look at your engine. You don't want people to be just looking at your trees, but that works pretty nice. Sometimes the trees that are left over after Christmas are pretty junky. They may be missing their bases. You just go down to your local craft store and you buy those little wooden nickels, drill a hole in the middle and glue the tree. It's got a wire base, and just glue it in there. And that will be as good as new. That will fix you up. On the whole, we've covered the bench, the track, the train, the buildings, the people, the trees. Everything should come off after Christmas except for the track that's screwed on, and if you have a bridge on it, that stays on. And then you can just tip it up on end and store it very easily. You don't need legs for a seasonal layout. If you're going to keep it up all year, then just put some legs in there, a piece of 2x2 with a bolt through it. It's going to be sufficient. Everything should be able to fold up and put it away. And then next, when do you start Christmas now? Halloween? Or the day after Thanksgiving was more traditional. Then you get your train set out and you set it up again. Now, I'm finished really kind of talking. I'm going to put this layout on the floor, and you're going to help me finish it by drilling some holes and putting the track on, and then testing it to see if it really is going to work. If you're a little scared of track work, they make a book. This is from Classic Toy Trains, and it's called Track Work for Toy Trains, and it covers all the different types of track, and you're certainly free to look at that as we progress here. You can put those on the floor. I'll show you this a little bit. Here's the framework on the underside. Very simple. And actually, because at Home Depot they sell 48-inch square pieces of lumber, and I didn't want to have anything left over, I bought that. But it was BC lumber, which means that there's an awful lot of sanding and filling to make sure that you don't pick up splinters on the top. A BC piece of plywood is designed to go under something else, whether it's floor or siding or whatever. And this one's pretty good now, but it was extra work. There's the hole for the cords. They're going to go down underneath, and you're going to say, now, well, wait a minute, Mr. Madison, if we put the holes down there, how do we get them from underneath? And you must have 4 bricks or 4 books or something you can put under the 4 corners, so there's room for that to run out. Now, we need to put some track together. The more times that you take track apart and put it together, the less reliable the connections are. So I've never put this track together. This is just how it comes from eBay. Somebody took this out of a train set and sold the parts individually. And so we're going to set it up here. Under every piece of Lionel track, there's a metal bar that holds or connects the two outside rails. It's this little metal bar. And right beside it is a set of feeders or connections for your feeder, where you hook up one wire to the middle rail and one wire, because of that bar, to the two outside rails. So the first thing that we have to do is find a connector. If you buy an oval of track, one comes with it, but those come on straight pieces usually. So here we have an accessory power wire for fast track, and we'll open that very carefully with our knife. When you're cutting and you're holding something like this, you don't want to pull the knife to yourself. You want to move that object away from you until it's open. There. Close our knife carefully and put it away. And now we have our wires. Traditionally, the red one goes in the middle, and the black one goes on the outside. These are flat connectors. There's a little bump on the blade in the track, which is supposed to hold those together. Sometimes it takes a little work to figure it out, especially when you're stupid like me. But we will try to get this done. You want everything to be tight, so if it just went on too easily, that wouldn't be right. We would like it to go on at all, though. Okay. You don't want to screw this track on and then find out that you had to go back and do the attachment again. Now, where's it going to go? There's no slot on either side of this, so we're just going to drill a hole in the table. But to tell where to drill that hole, we're going to want to put these pieces together. And they always tell you that the best way to put them together is to lay them flat on the table, to line them up, and then just pull the pieces together. Now, they may be not true, but if you do it in the air, inevitably you'll stab yourself with one of these little pieces of track. And I'm not having much luck here. Well, it is. It's supposed to be tight. It's supposed to be very tight. But it's also supposed to go. Yeah, you can start putting pieces together here. Yeah. For some reason, it just looks like I have two pieces coming out the same side there. I don't. It's just the slight curve. Am I still working with sound? Can you get a sound there? I'm going to grab a pair of pliers here. One of the essential tools. Did you get a nice click? See, I gave him the easy pieces, so.
I'm an HO guy, so this is all new to me.
Well, it's actually fun. You know, it's fun not to have to worry about the precision of HO. I'm having just a little bit of trouble with this tip lining up, so I'm just going to almost not really even twist it, but just kind of think about it until it goes in. It's not going to do that for me. Yeah. Well, eventually I have to put this in. See, that's not how you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to do it flat, but there we go. How'd that one get away? It's one of my nightmares before doing this program was that I would open these and there wouldn't be enough for a complete circle. As the track gets wider in radius, you need more pieces.
I'm having trouble trying to get it flat.
Yeah. That's the same problem I had with this middle piece is butting up to the
Oh, yeah.
end there. So without being too radical, I just want it to think that it's going to go in there. And we will push it.
Yeah, yeah.
This is what you're not supposed to do because inevitably we'll cut ourselves. But well, this tells you what one of the frustrations is with this
You only have to do this
stuff.
once.
No, well, that's part of why we don't want to have to do this too many times. But yeah, it's really tight. But if we can keep it tight, that's good.
Remember the old Lionel tractor? The one you ever had, you know, just the bent metal ties and pretty still got one? Yeah.
Okay.
This rail is so much more beautiful than
Yeah, it's nice stuff.
quite shaped.
Okay, now we have to remember where our wire was, and we know that it's we're going to use a 1/4-inch twist drill for these holes. There's going to be one going down through the track and another one, oh, you've got a line there, good. Another one coming up for the transformer. By the way, when you're cutting that hole in the middle, you don't want to use a spade bit because the spade bit gets caught up on the plywood layers. You want to use an auger bit, which means you may have to borrow one from one of your friends who's a carpenter. Thank you. Okay, turn the drill on. Make sure the chuck is tight around the drill. Now we'll look feebly for our little mark. Yeah, that chuck wasn't tight enough. Probably cut a hole in the Babcock-Smith floor. I didn't feel like that I hit it. Here's our transformer. They come nicely wrapped up from China. These have spade connectors for the transformer, but they don't have the connectors for the track. And that's why you want to be sure you have ones that fit the track. But our transformer is going to go right here. So it looks like our hole is going to go right in front of it. Somewhere right about there. Now, I have, partly because my drill isn't as sharp as it could be, but partly because I'm using BC plywood, we've got some splits here. Those are the things that you would hit with a little plastic wood and touch up paint. Now, we want to feed these through, right? And as we bring our track back into position, lo and behold, it actually fits pretty well. We'll come back up. For some reason, that hole came out very clean on the other end. It's unusual.
That's the part that doesn't show.
Well, that's exactly right. Okay. Now, we've got about 1 inch on each side, maybe 1.5 inches. And now we need a drill that will work with our... It's going to make some noise. There are different schools of thought about how many screws to put down. There are 2 holes in each piece of track. And one school of thought says to put a screw in each piece. And the other school of thought says, no, just put one end and let the other one float so that it will always be even. So we'll start with the one per section of track. And if you'd like to hold that so it doesn't creep on me as I'm moving, we'll do that. And we'll put our drill away so we don't lose it. And it looks like pilot hole. I can go one size bigger maybe. Too big, too big. So we're going to go back to our 1/16 inch drill. We'll tighten it up in the chuck. Whoops. We're running out of... I think we're going to make it. I think we are. Yes, we are. Okay. Now, if you can remember which ones have the pilot hole, and it should be the left end of each piece as you're facing it. So I'll put some screws in, and you can finish those up. The pilot hole is a little small, so how do you know when it's tight enough? You don't cinch these things down because the screw is steel and the track base is plastic. So you just bring it snug until the top of the screw is flush with the indentation that's made for it. And while he's doing that, I'm going to break this again. I don't know why I have such a rapport with this thing here. Last program I did the same thing. Yeah. I'm going to... I need a little more wire showing here, so while they're screwing in the screws, I'm going to strip a little bit more off of here. And we see that Lionel has tinned the end of the wires for us, so we don't have to worry about it splaying out. May take a little more push in there. It's only a 16th inch pilot hole, so it takes a little pressure to go in there. Who said this was easy? This is high art. I may have.
We won't hold it against them. Let's go to the next one over here. Oh, that one feels better. You go ahead and do that one. If you get in trouble, just Patrick will.
That's right. That's okay.
You're doing good, Patrick. No, you can go a little more. It's not sticking up at all. You're getting tight. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, let's see. It's getting a little hard, is it? Yeah, I'm gonna finish that one. And let's see, there's one more here. You want to do that? How's that? Even a 6-year-old can do this.
That's right.
Of course, he's pretty special 6-year-old, I know. It's getting hard now? Yeah, almost there. Oh, we'll give it a couple more turns. Just if you don't put it all the way in, it could catch on the choo-choo train. Perfect.
Okay, I'll take a shot at this one again. It is off center. It was my drilling was the problem.
That's what quality control's for.
That's right.
That's a nice looking track.
Okay. Now, if we've done everything correctly, that's a big if, isn't it? We'll put our drill away first so we don't step on that, break it. You may certainly unwrap it, as might as well, since actually, well, you've got it unwrapped. You could have used the circuit breaker one. Okay, my tools are all in order here. Now we'll test it. What's the matter? Oh man, yeah. This is why we like connectors, isn't it? Well, that's fairly simple to fix, isn't it? I mean, that's, yep. Why does it sound like that? Why does it sound like a taxi? Some of these industrial locomotives actually had electric horns 100 years ago almost, and they had those silly beep beep. Sounds like your Model T. Now we'll see what it looks like with a couple of cars on it. Karen, do you want to get a couple of trees from the end of that table? Coupling Lionel cars, there's a little tab you pull down, it opens the coupler, and it works much better on straight track. And you just have to remember that when you have a circle, it takes a little more care to do that. And we have some trees. Why don't we get a couple of those buildings and some people. I just found a price tag down here. It goes with that. Okay, now if we were going to plug this in, which we're not, the cord would go right down there. And why isn't it going? With a Lionel transformer, the first time you turn it on, the engine goes forward. The second time you turn it on, it sits there. The third time you turn it on, it goes backwards. For those of you who have HO scale trains, that drives you nuts. But there's a little button in there that you can actually switch, and it will always go forward.
That's traditional. They've been that way.
They've been that way forever. Merry Christmas.
Patrick, you want to go to home? I know you're experienced in going to home.
Tell them what we put on the
On the,
gondola.
what do we put on the gondola? Those are flat cars that would roll off, yeah. Karen wants me to tell you that in Arkansas, if we have a flat car or a gondola, we put a huge candy cane on it. I heard Linda talking earlier, she wants to put an obelisk on it. A granite obelisk. For you. And even though this stuff was designed for Babcock-Smith's Christmas sale, they did say that if anybody wants to buy any of this stuff, you could certainly buy it now. And of course, now is the time to make your... Yes, you don't have to take it back downstairs. Yes?
Layout is not just Dickens houses. The center is, since it's Polar Express with the center of.
If you saw the Polar Express movie, you remember that at the North Pole, the tree sits in the middle of a compass rose. Which way does the compass rose point?
All four of them point south.
They all have to point south, yes. Every direction is south from the Christmas tree.